On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Declan Chism re-ups for one more season, and Marat Khusnutdinov's rights get traded.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs in the rearview mirror, the sports have stopped sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we discuss Declan Chism's one-year extension, and we'll talk about what that means for the rest of the D-core depth, most notably Zeev Buium. We'll also talk about Marat Khusnutdinov's rights being traded and what that means in general, and we'll talk about development camp, which is coming up this week, and an opportunity to see some recent Minnesota Wild draft prospects in action here in Minnesota. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. As you can see, sporting a vicious sunburn from 4th of July festivities. Wear your sunscreen, folks, because it sneaks up on you. And joining me today, as always, to recap some news over the weekends, Alex Micheletti. Alex, hope you had a great 4th of July. We had a little news to catch up on here, and love that it seems like this always happens on Monday episodes, that we get the opportunity to just take some of the big news over the holiday weekend and dive into it in depth here today.
Yeah, Bill Guerin always coming through for us. This team is never dull, right? It's never. There's always something going on. Either drama or just people just scared or upset. It's a polarizing franchise for sure, and it's just like the season's gonna be here before we know it too.
I know.
It's crazy.
It's like less than. It's just over 3 months away, just over. And so we have some things to discuss here today, most notably Declan Chism, who was a restricted free agent for the Minnesota Wild. He is back after agreeing to a 1-year, $1 million deal for the upcoming season. Chism was acquired off of waivers from the Winnipeg Jets, who famously decided that Logan Stanley was the better defenseman to keep on the roster. And Chism came here. He provided a little bit of a push offensively. He stepped onto the power play and quarterbacked it quite well. And so this was, I think, an exciting ad for the Minnesota Wild during the season, and just kind of fully underscores how easy it was. And this is not a knock. This is going to sound like a knock. It's not. How easy it was for Chism to step in over the guys like Alex Goligoski and John Merrill. How easy it was to step in over them and look like a breath of fresh air. And he stepped in. He did just that.
Yeah, he was not a turnover machine. All he had to, just limit the mistakes of those other two that you mentioned. Just get it out of the zone was easy for him, unlike Goligoski and Merrill at times. This move, I think it gives the Wild some flexibility too, because depending on how the season goes, you could use them as trade trade bait for a contending team that is going to make the playoffs. And for once, a defenseman didn't get a multi-year contract. So
yeah,
I mean, everybody else except for Merrill is locked in. Even Bogosian got an extension. So I put it on Twitter that this lines up perfect for Zeev Boyum's kind of timeline. If they decide that Chisholm, hey, you got a good year, you can move on and have Boyum step in full time and kind of take that same role that Chisholm's in, power play time, and so I think that would be perfect. Or Merrill's contract is up after this season, so you could, if Chisholm if they feel like that they want him more than after this year, he could be the seventh defenseman, or split time with Bogosian, because I don't want to see Boyum in the press box if he's going to be playing. So that's everybody was saying they were talking about Merrill's deal, but I don't want Boyum to be like Merrill, Merrill's going to be sitting in the press box basically all season, and that doesn't help at all for Boyum if he signs.
No, and the way kind of I see this playing out is, if you don't have any Spurgeon setbacks, if you don't have any, additional injuries to anybody else in the D core, that what'll likely happen is, if this team is out of it at the trade deadline, you move somebody. Now, Zach Bogosian does not have trade protection that we know of. Jake Middleton, I think, has limited trade protection that starts next season. And then you've got John Merrill. And so you would think that somebody who doesn't factor into the long-term plans would get moved. And then Boyum can sign his ELC, burn a year, come up and play whenever Denver's season is done. But I like your line of thinking in that, at the minimum, you could bring Declan Chism in for next season as your seventh defenseman. And that, I think, suits you better than what you currently have with Johnny Vibes. The other thing that this allows is additional time just to see how the rest of the D prospects, just to see how they do this year. You've got a guy in Damon Hunt who played in the NHL last year. So if you suffer multiple D injuries, you could bring him up to help with that. But if you don't, then you give these guys the full season to kind of season, pun intended. And then maybe one of those guys is part of the equation next year. If not, then those are your call-ups for injury next season. And so it gives them time. It gives the Minnesota Wild time to just see this D prospect equation flesh out fully without having to massively rely on those players to come up and play meaningful minutes.
Yeah, this should be a big wake-up call for a lot of those guys, too, because, look, the organization just drafted a defenseman in the first round after
a couple of them.
Yeah, a couple of them after, a lot of those guys that are in Iowa right now were high defensive draft picks, too. So, I mean, especially Lambos. I mean, he was looked at as, a big deal, and you haven't heard much from him since he's been in Iowa, which is not a good thing at all. And so it's it's a big season for a guy like Jack Peart too, coming off an okay year at St. Cloud. The previous years before this past season were a lot better, and so he has a lot to prove too. He has a really big pedigree. Having a great high school career, good college career, and so we'll see how he does in his first year as a pro. And Damon Hunt, this seems kind of like a last chance type of thing, kind of like Adam Beckman. If he doesn't if he doesn't break through, they might look for another team that would take him on, kind of like the Devils just did for Beckman. So yeah, it's push up or shut up this season for him for sure.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out with the D-corps, and there are going to be a lot of eyes on Iowa this year, but the hope is that they have a little bit better of a season than they did this past year. But I guess we'll wait and see.
We don't know about the goalie situation too. That's going to affect everything. I mentioned it on Twitter too when they signed those 8 guys to the two-way or like it was like minor league type of contracts. And one of them was Troy Greznik, who's had a cup of coffee in the NHL and had a really good season with Milwaukee's AHL team, and so that was an interesting signing because that's a guy that if he has to play, you hope he doesn't, but if he has to play an NHL game, he can do that. You don't have to worry about him, and if they do trade Gus, that you have Wallstedt as number 2 and Troy as number 3, so that gives the Wild some flexibility for sure. A veteran type of goalie, which we've talked about, if that is if that's what they're trying to do, and especially if they're still trying to go after a top 6 forward, they need to find money somewhere, and so trading that Gus 3.5 would be huge for sure, especially if Line is still the target. Yeah,
if that is indeed the route that the team is trying to go. But I'm going to dive in a little bit to Greznik because in an episode later this week, because you look at his numbers in the AHL, pretty good. Like goals against averages for the most part under 3, sometimes substantially under 3. He's got some long playoff runs with the San Jose Barracuda back in 2015, 2016, 2016, 2017. So he's made some deep playoff runs. He started 11 playoff games for the Milwaukee Admirals this year to the tune of a 2.66 goals against average and a 902 save percentage. Oh, and then with the Providence Bruins 2 years ago, he had a 2 goals against average and a 933 save percentage in 30 games. So
the Iowa will definitely take those numbers. And it wasn't all Wallstedt's fault this past season because he had horrendous, D help in front of him. But that's a veteran that can help Iowa for sure and bring that winning culture to a team that's had some down years for sure.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing how that plays out, and we will keep an eye on that here as we move closer to the start of the season. Now, I want to dive into something that was mentioned on Thursday, I think it was, that caught some attention because it seems weird, but I am staring at a tweet right now that I think is going to hopefully kind of set everything in motion. So we'll talk about Marat Khusnutdinov's rights being traded and why that shouldn't be cause for alarm. That's on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you know me, I love sports. Doesn't matter if it's football, baseball, basketball, the NHL. I'm watching when it is on TV and when I'm able to watch. I love sports so much that I never want them to stop. But now with the playoffs for the NHL and the NBA in the rearview mirror, we get fewer games. And the sports just aren't sportsing the way that I want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us tonight for another edition of What the Bleep Are You Smoking? Denny, Alex, myself, we will be talking all things Minnesota Wild here as we continue to move through the month of July. That'll be at 8 o'clock tonight. So make sure to tune in. Have a good time. If you've got some questions, make sure to throw them in the comments. You know what to do. Throw them in the comments. We'll answer them, and we'll talk all things Minnesota Wild for you here this evening, right here on the Locked On Wild YouTube channel, which I should also announce crossed the 2,700 subscriber thresholds over the 4th of July weekend. So thank you, everybody, for your continued support in helping Locked On Wild continue to just shatter the ceiling.
Worldwide subscribers. We have people
Yes.
all over the world, which is amazing. Thank you so much, and all the people that watch us on the YouTube part of the podcast too. It's greatly appreciated.
Yes, 1,000%. We're just going to continue to keep things rolling here as we move. Let's take a look, Alex. This is one that was interesting because it just seemed odd, as reported by many. But in particular, I'm looking at the story written by Dylan Lokes of the Hockey News. The Minnesota Wild forward Marat Khusnutdinov's rights were traded to SKA of the KHL on Thursday morning. It was announced Thursday morning by SKA St. Petersburg that the club had acquired the rights of Marat Khusnutdinov in exchange for 2 players. HC Sochi acquired Khusnutdinov during the 2023-2024 season and helped the young Wild prospect grow into a better player. He had 0 points in 6 games for SKA to start the season and was getting under 5 minutes of ice time a night with them. After he was traded to Sochi, Khusnutdinov recorded 6 goals and 20 points in 49 games, eventually became the captain of the team. SKA acquired Khusnutdinov's rights back for defenseman Maxim Fedotov and forward Ilya Fedotov. If Khusnutdinov leaves the NHL for the KHL, he would belong to SKA. So, a couple of things with this. Because I've seen a lot of questions as to, does this mean that Khusnutdinov is going back to the KHL? Does this mean that Bill Guerin just tried to clear another roster spot so that he could add another veteran player to this team? What does John Hines have against playing young players? What is going on? Well, let's consider a couple things first. I believe there is a provision in Khusnutdinov's contract that if he were to not make the NHL roster, he could go to the KHL. I believe, and I searched high and low and I couldn't find anything that confirmed that. But I have seen mentioned elsewhere that there is a provision that if he didn't make the NHL roster this year, he could opt to go to the KHL as opposed to going to Iowa. But here's the rub on this. Do you think Khusnutdinov is likely to go back to the team that was playing him under 5 minutes a night? That led to him being traded. The reason Sochi did this is because Sochi is awful. So there was no chance. There's no chance that Khusnutdinov was going to go back to play for them. Player of that caliber, not going to go back and play for them. They were one of the worst teams in the KHL. That's why he got so much time at the NHL level, because they were one of the first teams They were one of the first teams to have their season end. But take that into consideration. Now you have put a situation, I think it is less likely even than that he would go back to the KHL, because now you've got the team that just was not playing you at all. And so I also have a tweet from Michael Russo, who talked about Declan Chism signing a 1-year deal. He said this gives the Wild $1.531 million in cap space heading into next season, barring changes and assuming Ogren and Khusnutdinov make the team. Somebody responded, wasn't Marat's rights traded back to SKA on Friday? Russo responded, that's normal. Happens all the time. He's coming back.
Yeah, it just, we take a look at another former Wild prospect, to the first off kid. It seems like if you go back, you're never coming back in the NHL. It just, if he didn't make it to the NHL, but you're never coming back to get a chance to hope you play in the NHL. It just, that league, it seems so corrupt too. I mean, yeah, who knows if this trade was, forced. And it just kind of seems like a Hail Mary from the KHL team. And like you said too, it does not help his development at all as a player to just go over there and get limited ice time. It makes no sense. He would, do a lot better in the AHL, which if you take a look at like the rankings of leagues, I would say NHL, AHL, and then KHL. I mean, as far as the difficulty and just, the style play and how it's going to make you a better player, you're definitely, better developed in the AHL than the KHL for sure. Especially your like the organization has the, same type of mindset with their AHL team on how they want things run and system wise. So yeah, it just seems a whole lot of, nothing to get worked up about for sure. And, another KHL, team trying to, cause drama.
Yeah. And like, you look at the roster, Kaprizov's making the team, Boldy, Eriksson, Zuccarello, Foligno, Hartman, Trennan, Goudreau, Johansson, and Rossi, and I'll say Loco too. Those guys are definitively making the team, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 spots on the roster. I still feel pretty confident that Marat Khusnutdinov is making the team. Like, I don't really even question that, because Eriksson, Rossi, and then after, so those are your first and second line centers. Beyond that, Freddie Gaudreau is probably going to be your fourth line guy, probably going to be your fourth line center. If
he doesn't play well, he's going to be the 13th forward. And we take a look at the forward depth too. There's some aging forwards on this team and guys that continue to get hurt too. So there's going to be chances, to move up and down the lineup. And Khusnutdinov actually showed that he could win some faceoffs too. Right away, he was winning some faceoffs. So, that's always a key in this league, is if you can, win some draws, you'll get some ice time for sure, especially on this team that has so much struggles in the circle other than Ek, at times. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything to worry about. And, maybe there isn't more offense there than people want, but, if he can be, a great defensive, type center winger, this team needs it for sure. And they need penalty kill help. So that's an area that he can try to, find a role on for sure, because it can't get any worse than it was last year. It's only hopefully on the way up.
Yeah, like he just feels like he is penciled in as that third line center right now. Just feels like that's his penciled in spot. And if one of those two is less likely to make the team out of camp, I would probably say it's Ogren. Like, I don't think you're going to do that to Marat Khusnutdinov in the final year of his ELC with needing to see what you need a full look at what you have with him so that you know what to give him for his next deal. Like, is he a bona fide piece of what you're building going forward? You got to figure that out. He very well could be, but are you really going to push that off by a year?
Well, there's another name too in this whole thing with Riley Heidt. That's the unknown with him, because he could come in and just light the world on fire in training camp and make the team. That would be very interesting, because look at the production. It's just absolutely incredible what he did in junior. And so you'd think that it would translate over, because all he's done is score. So that's a name that I can't wait to watch and see, if that was a steal of the draft when he was picked.
Best case scenario for us. Best case scenario for us this year is that Khusnutdinov, Ogren, and Heidt look fantastic in training camp and the preseason, to where you are legitimately choosing to be less offensive by not having all of them on the roster. Right. That's best case, because then you have to try to explain that logic and explain why you would not have all of them on the team, which would be just a hilarious conversation. Yeah, and that second line, they desperately need to figure out what they're going to do, because they can't go another full. We can't watch it. No, I can't. We can't just go another full season of Marcus Johansson in a top 6 role. And I don't care what he did in the World Championships, because it's a totally different game. It's not the NHL. You're not going up against full NHL teams, and and this is a contract year for him. So who knows what type of Marcus Johansson you're going to get, but you can't re-sign him. This has to be the end of the run. Yeah, you can. I can't do that. I could not make it through that type of a signing. And for the crowd that said, well, he got pretty close to his career averages, it's okay to want more. Yeah, it's okay to want more from a top 6 spot in a lineup. You have to generate more offense in that type of role. I mean, the shot totals were minimum. That's unacceptable for who you're having as line mates too, and the opportunities you're going to get. And at times he was on the power play too. That you have to want more when you're in that type of role. If this team wants to get back into the playoffs, they need a top 6. You take a look at what the Wild have compared to Edmonton now. It's like, and that's the goal, is to be the Western Conference team in the Stanley Cup. My God, it's crazy. They have Jeff Skinner now in a top 6 role, and he's making $3 million. That's a bargain for a guy that can put up 20, 30 in his sleep. And he's going to getting passes from Connor McDavid. So that, watch out for that. And Victor Arvidsson too, that they added, they kind of got him at a discount because he's coming off an injury, but they just, made themselves look like they're going to go right back into the Stanley Cup. So, the Wild have to do something in that, figure out what they're going to do, and move Marcus down and keep Gaudreau on the 4th line or the 13th forward. Move him during the month of August, right, when some team suffers an injury to a spot in their lineup. Do the same thing with Freddie, please. He might be the next buyout guy too, which is if people see buyout, they're just gonna freak out after what they've had to deal with. For the buyout for Gaudreau is not crazy. Right. It just $14 million, but just the thought of another buyout. I just hate that we're even having to discuss that. just should have not given that contract in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it was it wasn't the amount that it's just the amount of years.
Yeah.
For a
and
guy
that you can't trade him to half the league.
Right, which I brought up this name before, but it's like the Randy Dobnik contract and the Twins. And now he's just stuck in St. Paul because they can't have him on the major league team. And I don't know if the Wild just have too much respect for Freddie, but they kept him up here, and just they didn't bury his contract. That at some point that might happen where they send him down to Iowa, but it's not a good contract to have.
Oh, we need a contract person. This team needs somebody to handle contracts specifically.
Right. And after they lost the assistant GM, it was just that added to this past season of just chaos in the front office. So
yeah, let's move on to more exciting future things, because development camp is this week, and so we'll run through the roster and some players that we are excited to get a chance to see a little more up close. That's as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are going to finish by discussing development camp here as the Minnesota Wild gets set for that tomorrow, the 9th through the 11th. And there will be portions of development camp that will be open to the public. While development camp practices are free and open to the public, but you must register for all practice sessions at wild.com/open practices. Doors will open to fans 30 minutes before the first practice session of each day. Select Minnesota Wild prospects will sign autographs for fans Wednesday, July 12th, starting at 12 p.m. Alex, the roster is as follows, and some of these names I'm going to put me in a butcher shop because some of these are not easy. So the forwards, there are 17 forwards: Liam Ogren, Hunter Heights, Luke Loheights,
yes,
of Minnetonka,
UMD Bulldog,
yes, Matthew Sopp, Ryder Ritchie, Riley Height, Rieger Lorentz, Dylan Hercoian of Quebec and Northeastern University, Charlie Strammel, Cody Dupuis, Rasmus Kumpelainen, Mason Zabeski, and Jackson Nevers of Edina will also be there.
Future golfer too, by the way.
There we go. Felix Lacerte, Caden Bankier, and Pavel Novak, and Jimmy Clark, all the forwards. Another gopher. That will be part of the festivities. On defense, Ryan Healy, Jack Pert, Zeev Boyum, Nate Benoit, Aaron Kiviharu, Carson Lambos, Kyle Masters, Sebastian Sione, Stevie Leskovar, David Spacek, Aaron Pionk, and Calum Parker. The goalies, Samuel Levi, Kyle McClellan, Caden Barrico, Riley Mercer, William Russo, and Chase Wutzke. Again, apologies if I didn't pronounce any of those or some of those. I think I got a good amount of them. Alex, any names in particular that you are excited to see kind of blend in with the rest of the group or stand out from the rest of the prospect group here over these next couple of days?
Yeah, well, the name that Wild fans will remember. So Cody Dupuis' father is Pascal Dupuis, so that's kind of cool that his son gets invited to development camp for sure. Jackson Nevers is going to be playing for the Gophers, and so yeah, that's cool that he gets an invite. And then the height, like I said earlier in the episode, really looking forward to seeing him, and Zebuyam, just with all the rest of the top prospects. The Richie kid looks awesome too. I think that was a steal. Another second round gem by Judd Brackett. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him. Yeah, it's an exciting group. It's a lot of college hockey guys too. I'm a big college hockey guy, as we know, and so that's really cool. And Barrico is one of the best college goalies. It's tough to make it when you're not a huge goalie in the NHL, and so even to get an invite is it shows that that this organization believes in the talent that kid has. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun week, and these guys they might have to wait a little bit to make the team, just with all the extensions, but it's an exciting group, and it's showing, especially on the forward side, just the amount of talent that they're building up and ready to prove that they can be future NHLers for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw Rieger Lorentz out there because Isha talked about him on Friday in just being a guy that we talk so much about Riley Heights, but Rieger Lorentz kind of rapidly ascending in the wild prospect pool.
He was one of the best players in the Frozen Four, right, which was right there in the arena that he hopes to play in. Him and Zebuyam were just unbelievable, and he's coming from a Denver team that all they do is win, and so that you want that type of player in your culture and your organization, and so he is not he's only going to get more ice time at Denver this season. They want to win another national title. The Frozen Four is going to be in St. Louis area this upcoming season. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if him and Boyum sign after this season, and bring some of that winning culture to the Iowa Wild, and eventually the big team. So yeah, that's another name that is exciting for sure.
The other spot I'll just mention that I'm excited to see is just the goalie situation. Yeah. Obviously, we've got Jesper, who is expected to be the guy going forward. But beyond that, there's just a lot of intrigue kind of around these guys. What can they bring to the goalie, the organization? You're not going to necessarily need somebody to step into NHL shoes right now, but you have the Iowa Wild, you've got the Iowa Heartlanders, and they need goalies. So having guys that can step in and fill those spots is important.
Yeah, McClellan just won the Mike Richter Award, which is for the best goalie in college hockey. So I mean, they're adding to the pool of goalies that they look. The depth was not there this past season, and Hunter Jones is gone. So there's definitely an opening there for sure down there, and it kind of just really all depends on Gus right now, how they're gonna where they're gonna place guys. Some guys, if they go to the Heartlanders, it's not a bad thing. They have to get used to pro hockey. So and just kind of just wait their turn.
Everybody develops at a different speed,
right? There is especially goalies. Goalies take longer than D and forward, and forward's probably the easiest. I mean, because defense. Look at how hard it is for some of these D prospects in Iowa right now. So goalies, you just never know too, and some. It's kind of like kickers in the NFL, or relief pitching in Major League Baseball. One year they can just look incredible. The next, they're just awful, and sometimes, you end your career after a bad year in minor league hockey too.
Sometimes you parlay a good season into a 7-year deal, and you spend the rest of your time at AAA. It's not only the Wild, people. The Minnesota Twins have handed out a contract or two that just kind of make you scratch your head. So
it's crazy. And what a journey. I was just at the Saints game on Saturday night, and the Saints were playing Atlanta Braves' AAA team, and the starting left fielder for the Braves was Eddie Rosario. And I just I couldn't believe it, because, it's just like you spend so many years as a major leaguer, and then to just get demoted to AAA. It's such a different lifestyle. You're not taking plane top of the line plane rides and going to 5-star restaurants. You're on buses, and just it's the same thing in the AHL compared to the NHL. It's just but that's why some of these guys, when they get their chance, they never let go of it. Once you get up here, and Declan Chism, turned it into a $1 million deal. It's small, but for him, it's a big deal. So good for Declan Chism for taking advantage of an opportunity. You look at a guy like Gustav Forsling too, who's on waivers, just like Chisholm was, and gets picked up, and wins a cup with Florida, and gets a gigantic deal. Some guys take advantage, some don't, and so we'll see with the Wild here, especially like we talked about earlier in the episode. Some of these defensemen, it's put up or shut up years for sure.
Yeah, time to make a move in the Minnesota Wild organization. Well, that'll do it for today's episode. Today's listener question: of the players that we mentioned, which player are you most excited to see at Wild development camp this season? Best answer will lead off tomorrow's episode, and we'll post in the show notes here today. We'll post those names of players that are at development camp, so you've got those names for you. Again, which player are you most excited to see at development camp this week? Also, make sure to tune in for tonight's live show, 8 p.m. We will open the mic, and we'll talk all things Minnesota Wild here this evening. Denny will be pulling the strings, and we'll talk about some good stuff. I'm excited for tonight's show. Alex will be part of it, so make sure to tune in, because we'll cover a lot of bases here this evening. Also, make sure, if you haven't already, to hit that like button and subscribe on either your favorite audio platforms or on YouTube, so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday, even in the off season, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network.